Heinrich Himmler, May 23, 1945, a British military checkpoint in northern Germany. 3 days earlier, Himmler had shaved his mustache, put on a private's uniform, and prepared forged identity papers. He planned to blend into the mass of surrendering German soldiers and quietly disappear. The man who had overseen the systematic murder of millions joined a line of ordinary men at a checkpoint. British officers recognized him almost immediately. He was stripped and searched at the checkpoint. Guards walked him to a vehicle and drove him to a detention facility for formal interrogation. He was placed in a room, and a routine physical examination was ordered. A military doctor reached toward his mouth. Himmler bit down on a small glass cyanide capsule he had been hiding between his back teeth. The doctor shoved his fingers in and tried to pull it free. Too late. Himmler's body went rigid. His arms locked. His back arched off the floor. He convulsed so violently that 3 soldiers could not hold him still. Foam came from his mouth. His eyes rolled back. He took about 12 minutes to finish dying. Soldiers pinned him to the floor the entire time. He was wrapped in army blankets and buried in an unmarked ditch. The location was deliberately not recorded. Oskar Dirlewanger. June 1, 1945. A street in southwestern Germany. Dirlewanger was wearing civilian clothes. He had found a hunting lodge in the Black Forest after Germany's collapse and was waiting for things to settle. Someone recognized him. A person who had survived one of his camps passed him on the street and knew his face. French forces arrested him and placed him in a jail in Altshausen. Dirlewanger had commanded a brigade recruited from prisons and concentration camps. His men burned villages with people still inside. They executed children. They turned stretches of Belarus and Poland into mass graves. Even senior SS commanders quietly requested transfers away from him. Word of his arrest spread through the guards. Several of them were Polish. That night, a group of guards entered his cell. They did not use weapons. They used their hands and their boots. They worked in shifts. His ribs broke first. Then his skull fractured. The blows continued across his chest and abdomen. He was beaten until he could no longer move. They came back the following night, and the night after that. Internal bleeding accumulated steadily over the days that followed. His lungs slowly filled with fluid. Each breath became harder than the last. He died. June 5, 1945. The official report recorded heart failure. An exhumation, 15 years later, told a very different story. Reinhard Heydrich. May 27, 1942. Prague. Heydrich's open-topped Mercedes approached a tight hairpin bend in the road. He had governed occupied Czechoslovakia for months. He traveled without heavy escort. He considered himself untouchable. 2 resistance fighters were waiting at the bend. The first stepped forward with a Sten gun. It jammed. The second threw a modified anti-tank grenade. It detonated against the rear wheel. Shrapnel tore into Heydrich's back and side. He got out of the car. He tried to return fire. Then, his legs gave way. He was taken to a hospital and placed on an operating table. Surgeons removed his spleen and worked through the torn tissue for hours. When they were finished, they told the attending staff they expected him to pull through. Then, the infection arrived. The grenade had driven horsehair padding and upholstery fibers deep into the wounds. Without penicillin, bacteria moved through his blood unchecked. For 8 days, he lay in the hospital bed with a climbing fever. His skin turned gray. His breathing slowed. Nurses changed dressings that kept coming back, soaked. By the final days, he was no longer responding to anyone in the room. He died, June 4, 1942. The man who ran the Reich's terror apparatus was killed by the stuffing inside his own car seat. Adolf Hitler. April 30, 1945. Underground. The Führer bunker beneath Berlin. For weeks, Hitler had been living in these rooms while the city above him collapsed. Soviet artillery was landing less than 1 kilometer away. His hands shook so badly he could barely hold documents. He could not walk without assistance. He had spent his final days bent over a table in the map room, moving markers across a large paper map. The divisions those markers represented no longer existed. That afternoon, he sat down on a sofa next to Eva Braun. She took cyanide. He bit into a capsule at the same moment and pressed a loaded pistol against his right temple. The shot was heard in the hallway outside. Aides entered and found him slumped sideways, a small entry wound above his right ear. The sofa soaked through. 2 aides lifted his body by the arms and legs and carried it up the stairs and out through the bunker exit. A second pair followed with Eva Braun. Both bodies were laid in the Reich Chancellery garden. Petrol was poured over them. A match was dropped. Soviet troops found the charred remains 2 days later in a shallow pit. Erwin Rommel, October 14, 1944. Herrlingen, Germany. A quiet residential street. Rommel was at home recovering from injuries sustained in a July airstrike. He was Germany's most decorated field commander. Hitler had used his image on propaganda posters. The public called him the Desert Fox. That morning, 2 SS generals arrived at his door. They pulled him into a separate room away from his family. They presented him with 2 options. The first, a public trial before the People's Court. His family would lose everything. His son would likely face consequences. His record would be destroyed in full view of the nation. The second, a quiet death by poison, administered that same day. A full state funeral. His honors left intact. A widow's pension guaranteed. The evidence against him was indirect. He had not planted the bomb in the July assassination attempt against Hitler, but investigators had established that he had been informed of the plot in advance and had said nothing. Rommel walked back into the house. He put on his uniform jacket and his medals. He embraced his wife. He shook his son's hand and told him only that he would be dead within 15 minutes. He walked out to the SS car and got in. The door closed. One of the generals handed him the capsule. He put it in his mouth and bit down. His head dropped forward. His body went slack. By the time the car reached the end of the road, he was gone. The official announcement blamed an Allied airstrike. The state funeral proceeded as promised. The truth was not made public for years. Friedrich Fromm, July 20th, 1944. Berlin. The bomb had gone off. Hitler had survived. Fromm commanded the Home Army. He had known about the assassination plot in advance. For hours after the explosion, as the outcome remained uncertain, he stayed quiet and waited. When it became clear Hitler was alive, Fromm moved immediately. He arrested the surviving conspirators himself. He convened a rushed military tribunal inside his own headquarters that same night. Before dawn, he had Stauffenberg and 3 others taken to the courtyard and shot. He believed eliminating the witnesses would bury his involvement. It did not. Gestapo officers had spent the preceding weeks interviewing survivors, collecting written statements, and cross-referencing testimony from multiple sources. Fromm's name appeared in too many of them. Several days after the executions, Gestapo officers arrived at his office. He was placed under arrest, walked out of the building, and taken into custody. He was charged not with conspiracy, but with cowardice. The court ruled that he had known, done nothing to prevent it, and then moved only to protect himself. He was sentenced to death, March 19, 1945. Brandenburg Prison. Fromm was walked across the yard to a courtyard wall. He reportedly asked to give the order to fire himself. The request was denied. The volley struck him in the chest. He was dead before he reached the ground. He had ordered his co-conspirators shot in July. He was shot in the same manner in March, 8 months later. Paul Blobel. September 29, 1941. Outside Kyiv, a ravine called Babi Yar, notices had been posted across the city the previous day, ordering the Jewish population to assemble at a designated street corner with documents and valuables. Blobel commanded the unit waiting at the ravine. Over 2 days, his men organized 33,771 Jewish men, women, and children into groups and directed them in sequence toward the edge. The shooting ran in shifts. By the time it ended, explosives were needed to partially collapse the ravine and cover what was inside. After the war, Blobel ran a classified program called Operation 10005. Prisoner work details were forced to dig up mass graves across Poland, Ukraine, and the Baltic states and stack the remains on open-air iron grates. Blobel stood at the sites while the pyres burned. He did this for 2 years. Allied investigators found him living under a false name in the American occupation zone. He was transported to Nuremberg, tried, and in 1948, sentenced to death. June 8, 1951. Landsberg Prison. Blobel was walked to the gallows just after dawn. The drop was correctly calculated. His neck broke on impact. He was dead in seconds. 33,771 people at Babi Yar alone did not have that. Most of them stood at the edge of that ravine long enough to understand exactly what was about to happen.